I want you to take a deep breath, lean back, and gently close your eyes. Try to listen closely. Can you hear the rhythmic, slightly off-kilter squeaking of a metal shopping cart being pushed across a freshly waxed linoleum floor? Can you smell the faint, comforting scent of roasted coffee beans grinding at the end of the aisle, mixing with the cool, damp air drifting over from the produce section? Welcome back to the American supermarket of the 1980s. Today, we are going deep into the aisles of our collective memory to rediscover 20 beloved foods and cherished treats that have completely vanished from the shelves forever. These were not just things we ate. They were the sweet rewards for surviving a long school day, the crunchy companions to our Saturday morning cartoons, and the colorful centerpieces of our childhood joy. I promise you, by the end of our journey today, when we uncover the one legendary baseball-themed candy bar that disappeared far too soon, you will feel the warmth of those golden summer afternoons rushing right back to you. Before we begin opening these forgotten packages, let us remember what a trip to the grocery store actually meant back then. Time seemed to flow entirely differently in those days. There was no rushing, no frantic scanning of barcodes at self-checkout machines, and no staring down at glowing screens while waiting in line. A trip to the local supermarket was a genuine social event. Do you remember standing next to your mother in the cereal aisle, patiently waiting as she caught up on neighborhood news with a friend she bumped into? The store was a buzzing hub of our community. We waited in line, flipping through the pages of glossy magazines, listening to the metallic clatter of the cash register keys and the heavy thud of the stamp pressing ink onto paper bags. There is a strange myth today that because we lived without modern technology, our lives were somehow poorer or less connected. In truth, our lives were infinitely richer in patience, in genuine human interaction, and in the simple, vivid anticipation of discovering a new, brightly colored box of cereal on the shelf. Everything felt more deliberate, more tactile, and deeply woven into the fabric of our family routines. Now, let us walk down these familiar aisles together and see what treasures we can find. And now, let us wander down the frozen food aisle to remember the absolute joy of Jell-O pudding pops. Close your eyes and try to recall the heavy, fogged glass door of the supermarket freezer section. You would pull it open with both hands, feeling that rush of frigid, frosty air on your face, and reach for that familiar cardboard box. These were not just ordinary ice pops. They had a unique, slightly icy and almost crystallized texture on the very outside that melted into a rich, creamy, incredibly dense pudding goodness right on your tongue. Do you remember the smooth, flat wooden stick that you would inevitably chew on for far too long after the pudding pop was completely gone? Biting into the cold pudding offered a slight resistance, a gentle, satisfying snap before the velvety chocolate or vanilla flooded your senses. It was a staple of warm, fading summer afternoons, a well-deserved reward after a long day of riding bicycles around the neighborhood until the streetlights flickered on. We did not need fancy, expensive, artisanal gelato back then. We had these perfectly shaped, frosty treats waiting for us in the chest freezer at home. They tasted of simpler times, of carefree laughter, and of a childhood where the biggest worry was whether you got the chocolate one or the vanilla one. Let us move over to the breakfast aisle, a place of bright, primary colors and morning promises, to remember the carnation breakfast bars. If you were rushing out the door in the early 1980s, trying desperately to catch the yellow school bus on a crisp, frosty morning, this was your ultimate companion. Do you remember the distinctive, heavy foil wrapper that crinkled so loudly in the quiet, sleepy kitchen? You would tear it open to reveal a dense, remarkably chewy bar coated in a rich layer of chocolate that would almost instantly begin to slightly melt against the warmth of your fingertips. It was not at all like the crumbly, dry granola bars of today. It had a hearty, almost vitamin-rich density to it, paired with a chocolatey sweetness that felt like an absolute luxury before first-period algebra. Eating one felt like a thrilling small rebellion, like having a candy bar for breakfast. Yet our mothers wholeheartedly approved because the box promised essential vitamins and minerals. The satisfying crunch of the peanut butter flavor, or the smooth chocolate chip, provided a comforting, steady rhythm to our hurried mornings. They were a symbol of the changing times, yet they retained a deep, nourishing comfort that we simply cannot find anymore. Next, we find ourselves slowly browsing the cookie aisle, where the Keebler elves once bestowed upon us the sheer, undeniable perfection of magic middles. Imagine the gentle rustle of the crinkly packaging as you reached in to pull out one of these unassuming, pale shortbread cookies. From the outside, they looked so simple, just a slightly domed, golden-baked circle with no intricate designs. But the true magic, exactly as the name promised, was hidden completely from view. As you took that first, delicate bite, the buttery, incredibly crumbly shortbread would immediately give way to a generous, soft center of incredibly rich fudge. Do you remember how the shortbread would just melt away on your tongue, leaving only that decadent chocolate to linger? We would sit at the kitchen table, our feet barely touching the cool linoleum floor, dunking them carefully into a tall, sweating glass of ice-cold milk. The milk would soften the cookie just enough without making it fall apart, a delicate balancing act of childhood snacking. They were not overly complicated, they had no colorful sprinkles or flashy icing, but they possessed a profound, simple perfection. It is deeply heartbreaking to know that we can no longer walk into a supermarket and bring home that exact taste. While we are still in the snack aisle, let us pause to remember the futuristic wonder of space food sticks. Developed during the space race of the 1970s, but remaining a beloved supermarket staple well into the 1980s, these treats captured the boundless imagination of our entire generation. Try to recall pulling that long, slender, silvery foil tube from the box. It felt like you were holding a piece of classified astronaut equipment right in your own kitchen. Tearing off the top revealed a dense, cylindrical stick that was chewy, slightly glossy, and packed with an intense peanut butter or chocolate flavor. The texture was completely unique, a little bit like a soft caramel, but with a hearty, substantial chew that took time to eat. We would pack them in our metal lunchboxes, proudly showing our friends that we were eating exactly what the astronauts ate on their way to the moon. They smelled faintly of roasted peanuts and sweet malt, a scent that immediately made you feel adventurous. Eating a space food stick was not just about satisfying mid-afternoon hunger. It was a grand ritual of pretending to explore the stars from the safety of our suburban backyards. They fed our stomachs, yes, but more importantly, they fed our grandest dreams. Now, let us wander over to the baking aisle, where boxes of gelatin held the promise of domestic magic, to remember the absolute marvel of Jell-O 1, 2, 3. This was not merely a dessert. It was a fascinating science experiment conducted right on our kitchen counters. Do you remember the excitement of watching your mother tear open that single packet and pour the powdery contents into the glass blender? The loud, whirring hum of the blender filled the room as the hot water mixed with the powder. But the real magic happened after the mixture was carefully poured into those tall, elegant glass dessert bowls and placed gently into the refrigerator. As the hours slowly ticked by, we would press our noses against the cold refrigerator shelves, watching the liquid miraculously separate into 3 perfectly distinct layers. At the very bottom settled a firm, fruity gelatin. In the middle, a soft, creamy, custard-like mousse appeared. and resting delicately on the top was a light, foamy, cloud-like layer. When you finally dipped your long silver spoon into the glass, breaking through all three textures at once, it was a symphony of mouthfeel. It was a dessert that required patience, anticipation, and a sense of childlike wonder that is so rarely found in a box today. Let us turn our attention to the beverage aisle, a place usually filled with entirely predictable colas and fruit drinks, to remember the brief, bright, and spicy life of 7-Up Gold. This was not the clear, crisp lemon-lime soda we had all grown up drinking out of plastic cups at family picnics. Oh no, this was something entirely different, something that felt wonderfully mature and slightly mysterious to our young minds. Try to recall the distinct amber-colored can sitting bravely on the supermarket shelf, glowing under the bright fluorescent lights. When you pulled back the stiff aluminum tab, there was that sharp, satisfying hiss, followed instantly by an aroma that was a complex, surprising blend of ginger, cinnamon, and subtle apple notes. It was a dark soda, rich and caffeinated, offering a spicy, warm bite that caught the back of your throat in the most delightful way. Pouring it over freshly crushed ice in a tall glass, you could watch the golden bubbles aggressively rise to the surface, bringing with them a scent that was completely unique to the late 1980s. It tasted like autumn in a glass, a bold, spicy experiment that vanished entirely too soon, leaving behind only a faint, sweet memory for those lucky enough to have tasted it. As we drift toward the candy aisle, let us pause and pay our respect to the wonderfully delicate and deeply satisfying Summit Candy Bar. In a time dominated by heavy, solid bricks of chocolate, the Summit Bar offered an entirely different, incredibly refined eating experience. Do you remember carefully pulling back the dark, elegant foil wrapper to reveal the beautifully crafted confection inside? It consisted of two distinct, perfectly rectangular cookie wafers that felt incredibly light in your hand. These crisp wafers were generously coated in roasted peanuts and completely enrobed in a wonderfully smooth layer of rich milk chocolate. The absolute best part of eating a Summit Bar was the sound. When you took your first bite, or when you snapped it in half to share a piece with a younger sibling, it made a sharp, echoing crunch that was immensely satisfying. The delicate, airy crunch of the wafer contrasted beautifully with the dense, salty chew of the peanuts. It smelled wonderfully of roasted nuts and sweet cocoa, a comforting scent that filled the car on the drive home from the grocery store. The Summit Bar was a brief, shining star in the candy aisle, bringing a touch of elegant, crispy joy to our ordinary, beautiful afternoons, before it quietly disappeared forever. Let us step back into the snack aisle to remember the sticky, incredibly sweet ritual of eating Fruit Corners pudding roll-ups. In the mid-1980s, the idea of turning creamy pudding into a flattened, portable sheet was nothing short of miraculous. Try to recall the heavy, slightly waxy cardboard box that held these precious, individually wrapped treasures. When you pulled one out, you had to carefully unroll the crinkly, semi-transparent plastic sheet. The aroma of intense, concentrated milk chocolate or creamy vanilla would immediately hit the air. But the true ritual was in the peeling. You had to use your fingertips to slowly, meticulously peel the thin layer of flattened pudding away from the plastic backing without tearing it. The texture was wonderfully bizarre. It was slightly tacky to the touch, flexible like leather, yet it dissolved on your tongue with the exact, rich flavor of a fresh pudding cup. We would wrap them tightly around our index fingers, eating them slowly, bit by sticky bit, as we sat on the living room carpet watching television. It left our fingers slightly greasy and smelling beautifully of chocolate for hours. It was an entirely novel, incredibly fun way to eat a familiar dessert, bringing a unique tactile joy to our childhood snacking. Now we must journey down the cereal aisle, the most vibrant and intensely colored aisle in the entire supermarket, to find the legendary Nintendo cereal system. If you were a child in the late 1980s, nothing represented the magical intersection of weekend mornings and digital adventures quite like this box. Do you remember standing in the aisle, mesmerized by the bright, chaotic artwork of Mario and Link promising hours of joy? The absolute genius of this cereal was its packaging. You did not just get one bag of cereal. The box was vertically divided to hold two entirely separate foil bags. When you tore open the Mario side, a wave of sweet, fruity aroma washed over you, accompanied by crunchy pieces shaped like little red mushrooms and green turtles. Tearing open the Zelda side released a distinct, tangy berry scent, with shields and heart-shaped marshmallows waiting to be poured into your bowl. The ritual involved carefully pouring a little bit from both bags to create the ultimate breakfast alliance. We would sit mere inches from the glowing television set, crunching loudly, the sweet, vividly colored milk dripping from our spoons as we prepared to spend the entire Saturday trying to rescue the princess. It was pure, sugary magic in a cardboard box. Remaining in that glorious cereal aisle, let us look for the bright, inescapable yellow box of Pac-Man cereal. Before video games lived in our pockets, they lived in loud, dark arcades and, surprisingly, on our breakfast tables. Try to recall the specific, sweet smell of toasted corn puffs that greeted you as you pushed your hand deep into the crinkly wax paper bag. The cereal pieces were crunchy, golden spheres meant to represent the video game hero himself. But the true prizes, the treasures we actively hunted for with our silver spoons, were the little, brightly colored marshmallows shaped like the infamous arcade ghosts. There was an incredibly specific, sugary dust that coated those marshmallows, leaving a sweet residue on your fingertips. As you added cold milk, the colors of the marshmallow ghosts would gently bleed into the bowl, turning the milk into a sweet, pastel-colored nectar that tasted exclusively of 1980s childhood. We would read the back of the box over and over, studying the printed mazes while listening to the crunch echoing in our ears. This cereal did not just feed us, it successfully translated the glowing, neon excitement of the arcade into a comforting, incredibly sweet morning ritual that started our weekends off perfectly. Let us look just one shelf down to find a cereal that was visually unlike anything else we had ever poured into a bowl. Smurf Berry Crunch. The sheer, vibrant intensity of this cereal was a marvel of the decade. Do you remember tearing open the box and being greeted by an overwhelmingly sweet, artificial berry aroma that could easily fill the entire kitchen? The cereal itself was a brightly colored collection of crunchy corn puffs, dyed in stunning, almost unnaturally vivid shades of red and blue. The tactile sensation of shaking the box and hearing those light, sugary puffs tumble into a ceramic bowl was the official sound of a carefree morning. But the most memorable part, the true magic trick of Smurf Berry Crunch, happened entirely after the cereal was gone. The incredibly vibrant food coloring would slowly dissolve, transforming the remaining milk into a beautiful, magical shade of deep purple. Tipping the bowl back to drink that intensely sweet, berry-flavored purple milk was the ultimate reward. It felt like we were consuming something crafted in a cartoon forest, a sugary, colorful fantasy that made the very real world outside our kitchen windows feel just a little bit brighter and much more magical. Now, let us wander back toward the savory snacks, where the scent of salt and baked goods lingers in the air, to remember the incredible crunch of Keebler Tato skins. At a time when standard potato chips were becoming wildly predictable, This hearty, incredibly flavorful snack arrived like a revelation. Try to recall the sturdy, dark brown bag that boldly promised baked potato appeal. When you ripped it open, a powerful, incredibly savory aroma of chives, sour cream, and real baked potato rushed out to meet you. These were not thin, fragile chips. They were incredibly thick, dramatically curved pieces designed to look exactly like hollowed-out potato skins. The tactile experience of picking one up was completely different. They felt heavy, substantial, and coated in a generous layer of intense, salty seasoning dust that clung to your fingers. When you finally took a bite, the crunch was deafening, a loud, deeply satisfying snap that echoed in your ears. The rich, sharp flavor of the sour cream and onion baked right into the thick, dark crust was profoundly comforting. They were the perfect companion for a quiet afternoon of watching weekend television, offering a hearty, savory depth that modern potato chips simply cannot seem to successfully replicate today. Let us return to the candy aisle for a moment to truly appreciate the heavy, magnificent, and entirely uncompromising PB Max candy bar. In a time when most chocolate bars were attempting to be slim, delicate, or elegantly wrapped, the PB Max was a thick, substantial square of pure, rustic joy. Do you remember the sheer, impressive weight of it resting comfortably in the palm of your hand? You would tear open the distinct packaging to find a chunky, wonderfully messy-looking treat that did not care about being neat. It started with a crunchy, incredibly sturdy whole-grain cookie base that provided a loud, echoing snap when you bit into it. Resting heavily on top of that was a massive, impossibly thick layer of creamy, perfectly salted peanut butter. All of this was completely enrobed in a thick shell of rich, sweet milk chocolate. The absolute genius of the PB Max was in its texture. The way the smooth, soft peanut butter contrasted violently yet perfectly with the rugged, hearty crunch of the cookie. The smell of roasted peanuts and sweet chocolate would rise up intensely before you even took the first bite. Looking back, we did not just lose a simple candy bar. We lost a perfectly engineered, heavily comforting moment of true afternoon bliss. Let us step back into the beverage aisle, away from the brightly colored sodas, to recall the incredibly crisp, sophisticated refreshment of original New York seltzer. If you wanted to feel like a sophisticated adult in the 1980s, this was exactly what you reached for. Try to remember the pleasant, heavy weight of the small glass bottle in your hand. It felt premium, completely different from the flimsy aluminum cans of regular soda. The most distinct memory for many of us was the label. It was made of a strange, incredibly satisfying foam material that you would subconsciously peel off in long strips with your thumbnail while talking to your friends. Do you remember the loud, sharp pop when you unscrewed the metal cap, releasing a fine mist of carbonation into the air? The aromas were incredibly clear and distinct. Black cherry, vanilla cream, or bright lemon lime. Pouring it into a glass revealed a completely crystal-clear liquid full of aggressive, sparkling bubbles that danced wildly. The taste was remarkably clean, not overly syrupy, delivering a sharp, refreshing bite that cleansed the palate perfectly. It was a drink of quiet elegance, a refreshing pause in our chaotic youth that provided a truly sparkling moment of clarity. Moving along to the baked goods aisle, where the scent of processed sugar and vanilla ruled supreme, we must stop and remember the legendary Hostess Chocodiles. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like a simple variation of a familiar sponge cake, but those who knew truly understood its immense superiority. Imagine peeling back the familiar, crinkly plastic wrapper. Instead of seeing pale, golden cake, you were greeted by a substantial, beautifully oblong treat completely encased in a surprisingly thick, slightly waxy layer of dark chocolate. The tactile anticipation was immense. When you took a bite, the outer chocolate shell would fracture with a deeply satisfying audible crack. This firm, chocolatey exterior immediately gave way to the incredibly soft, airy vanilla sponge cake underneath, finally leading to the famously sweet, fluffy white cream hidden exactly in the center. The combination of textures, the snap of the chocolate, the pillowy softness of the cake, and the smooth cream was an absolute masterpiece of supermarket engineering. The sweet scent of cocoa and vanilla lingered on your hands long after the wrapper was thrown away. It was a decadent, incredibly messy, and profoundly joyful treat that elevated our school lunchboxes into moments of sheer luxury. Let us venture toward the juice aisle, where brightly colored liquids promised endless summer refreshment, to remember the completely unique, delightfully strange squeeze-it drinks. This was not a drink you poured delicately into a glass. It was a beverage that demanded your physical participation. Try to visualize the colorful, semi-translucent plastic bottles lined up tightly on the shelf. The plastic was magically molded into the shape of exaggerated, goofy cartoon faces that squeezed inward at the waist. Do you remember the incredibly specific ritual of opening one? You had to firmly pinch the flat, wing-shaped plastic top and twist it repeatedly until the thin plastic seal finally snapped, revealing a small drinking hole. The scent of intensely sweet, entirely artificial fruit punch would instantly waft out. The best part was the physical act of drinking. You had to aggressively squeeze the soft plastic bottle, forcing the vividly colored, hyper-sweet liquid out in a rapid, forceful stream. We would drink them on hot, humid July afternoons, sitting on the front porch steps, our lips stained bright red or blue from the sugary syrup. The empty, crumpled plastic bottles would pile up, colorful remnants of a summer afternoon spent entirely outdoors, powered by pure liquid sugar. Now, let us walk back past the freezer section to remember a product that defied all known laws of culinary logic: micro-magic milkshakes. In an era profoundly obsessed with the convenience of the microwave oven, the idea of taking a frozen, rock-solid milkshake and microwaving it to perfection felt like actual sorcery. Try to recall pulling that bright yellow, sturdy plastic cup from the icy freezer. It felt completely solid, utterly immovable. The instructions demanded precision. You would place the cup inside the glowing microwave, punching in the exact number of seconds, and watch it spin slowly on the glass carousel. The humming of the microwave felt like a countdown to something completely impossible. When the timer beeped, you would pull out the surprisingly warm plastic cup, punch the thick, oversized plastic straw through the foil lid, and stir frantically. The magic was real. The solid ice had miraculously transformed into a thick, creamy, perfectly drinkable vanilla or chocolate milkshake. It smelled sweetly of melted ice cream and cocoa powder. It was incredibly weird, undeniably fascinating, and it tasted exactly like the thrilling, rapid technological progress of the late 1980s happening right inside your very own kitchen. Let us pause by the cracker aisle, where cardboard boxes held the savory staples of our pantries, to appreciate the distinct, unmistakable charm of Nabisco Swiss cheese crackers. In a sea of plain, square crackers, these stood out entirely. Do you remember opening the red and yellow cardboard box and being instantly greeted by a notably sharp, slightly pungent, and completely wonderful aroma of aged cheese? The crackers themselves were a visual delight. They were carefully baked into irregular, pale yellow squares, but the genius touch was the little, perfectly round holes stamped directly into the dough, making them look exactly like miniature slices of real Swiss cheese. The tactile sensation of running your thumb over those tiny holes is a memory burned into our fingertips. When you placed one on your tongue, it was incredibly flaky, leaving a dusting of fine salt and cheese powder behind. The bite was wonderfully crisp, crumbling beautifully and delivering a rich, buttery, savory cheese flavor that felt remarkably sophisticated for a boxed cracker. We would eat them by the handful, the sharp cheese scent lingering in the kitchen, proving that even the simplest, savory supermarket snacks of our youth possessed an incredible, lasting character. Moving back to the sweet side of the cookie aisle, we must look for a snack that quite literally smiled right back at us. Giggles cookies. In the mid-1980s, when we needed a simple, cheerful pick-me-up, these cookies were waiting in their crinkly packaging to brighten our day. Try to recall sliding the thin plastic tray out from the wrapper. Sitting perfectly in their molded slots were round, golden shortbread cookies. But the beautiful charm of Giggles was the wide, incredibly happy, cartoonish, smiling faces baked directly into the top cookie layer. Do you remember peering closely at the smile? Peeking brightly through the eyes and the wide, grinning mouth was a delightful combination of dark chocolate fudge and sweet vanilla cream. It was a dual filling that offered the absolute best of both flavor worlds. The scent was intensely sweet, a lovely mix of baked butter, rich cocoa, and vanilla extract. Taking a bite meant breaking the smile, but the wonderfully satisfying crunch of the shortbread melting into the soft, dual-flavored cream quickly made up for it. They were playful, innocent, and undeniably fun to eat. In a world that often feels far too serious today, the simple, unapologetic joy of a smiling cookie is something we deeply and truly miss. Finally, we arrive at the very end of the candy aisle to uncover our last and perhaps most legendary missing treasure. Let us remember the incredibly dense, profoundly glorious Reggie bar. Introduced with massive fanfare and tied directly to the greatness of American baseball, this candy bar was entirely unique in its construction. Do you remember the bright, unmistakable orange circular wrapper catching your eye near the checkout counter? When you tore the paper open, you did not find a traditional rectangular bar. Instead, sitting heavily in your hand was a thick, substantial, wonderfully uneven circular disc of chocolate. The smell was overwhelmingly rich, a powerful wave of deeply roasted peanuts and thick, sweet caramel. When you took a bite, your teeth had to work through a phenomenally thick layer of milk chocolate to reach the intensely chewy caramel and the densely packed, salty peanuts hidden inside. The chew was long and deeply satisfying, stretching the caramel out with every bite. Eating a Reggie bar felt incredibly special, like you were holding a piece of sports history right in your own hands. The taste perfectly captured the sweet, slow, golden afternoons of a 1980s summer, where the sound of a baseball game played quietly on a distant AM radio. As we slowly walk out of this supermarket of memories, leaving the brightly colored aisles behind us, it becomes incredibly clear what we are actually missing. We are not simply mourning the loss of chocolate, sugar, or cleverly designed cardboard boxes. What we truly miss is the texture of that specific time in our lives. We miss the slow, deliberate pace of a Saturday morning, the tactile joy of unrolling a sticky, sweet treat, and the comforting predictability of our mothers pushing that squeaky shopping cart down the linoleum aisles. These 20 lost foods were the sweet, savory punctuation marks in the long, beautiful sentences of our youth. They brought us together to share a snack on the porch, to trade a cookie in the school cafeteria, and to connect with each other without screens or distractions. If this journey down memory lane brought a smile to your face, Please gently press the like button and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more warm, nostalgic walks through our shared history. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 20 lost supermarket foods do you miss the absolute most? Or is there another cherished, forgotten treat from the 1980s that still beautifully lingers in your memory? Please, sit down and share your personal, heartfelt stories with us in the comments below.